Hi, it's Anne. Thanks for stopping by. So we're going to be doing kind of a different kind of edge embellishment today. It's something we can use on cards, we can use on just the edges of pages, we can even use it on the spine of books. And it's using yarn. I got into my knitting basket and got out a few samples of yarn. You need just a little bit to do this project. If you're not a yarn hoarder like I am, you might have a little bit of yarn around that will be perfect for this. If not, if you've got a friend, a neighbor, a cousin, anybody you know who knits is going to be more than happy to give you a little bit of yarn for this technique. So we'll set that aside so we have a little more room, and then I'm gonna show you what we're going to be doing. This is a cute little winter journal. It's not Christmas per se, but it is very wintry. And of course, yarn. That makes us think of warm woolen mittens and hats and warm scarves. And yarn is a really nice thing to use as a textural element in a junk journal. And all I did was I just punched some holes on the tops of these little journal cards and just wove a little yarn. We're going to be working on that technique here. I'll show you what it looks like on a larger tag. There's a tag in the back of the book with one of our cold winter weather nuthatches there adorning that tag. And there is some more of this fluffiness on the top of that tag. Doesn't that feel like winter? It makes you want to touch it. It makes you think of that warm scarf, and it's super easy to do. I think we don't use enough yarn in our junk journals. At least I don't in mine, but that is changing today. It's also really, how useful would this be just along a page edge of a signature, just a decoration along the edge of a page. And the reason this is kind of nice on a page edge is if you're worried about too much bulk in your journal, because this, bulky yarn does, it's going to add a little bit of bulk if it's within the folds of your signature. But you can have it poking out the edge and just have it be a page decoration. This is a journaling spot for you. Maybe it can be a little tuck spot where you can tuck in a picture or a folded journaling spot. It could be just a super fun, just inviting you to touch it sort of textural element. Here is another way that you can use this technique. This is just on a little notebook. I'll want to decorate the cover a little bit more, maybe with one focal point. This is not Christmassy. It could be wintry with the blue. But I just put this along the spine of the journal. And how I did this was I took my piece that I had put my yarn, attached my yarn using this technique, and I just glued that whole piece to the front of a journal. So if I can show you, this is, I just stitched my journal onto like a piece of file folder here. This is my whole folder. And then the piece that I did the decorating on, that was a separate piece that I glued on top of that file folder, and a matching piece on the back. So the paper, the cover paper is split here. I hope that makes sense. Let's just get into the technique. Shall we do that? Very simple, very easy. I think I'm just going to use a small piece of this scrapbook paper. I've glued it onto, I think this was a master board that I was planning on making tags and journaling cards out of. But it's kind of nice because on the back I do have some plain paper glued there. So if a little bit of that is going to be showing beyond the edge of the page, if I want that tufted yarny goodness to be showing outside the page, that little bit of the reverse side is going to be prepared in some way. And what I have been doing, because you want to pay attention to how close together your holes are that you weave your yarn into, I have been doing them about 1 centimeter. I'm going on a sentimental journey. 1 centimeter apart. And I don't often use centimeters, but my ruler, and I'm sure yours, helpfully provides that information. So I'm just going to mark 1 centimeter apart here. Then I'm going to pull out my punch. And make a hole in each one of these marks. Yeah, that's probably going to be enough. I am going to use my Crocodile Big Bite. This is the Crocodile Big Bite 2. It looks like this. You see me use this all the time. I think people have love-hate relationships with their crocodiles. I have seen people get online and say, oh, I spent $40 on my crocodile and it was the worst $40 I ever spent. It was, you know, it was just terrible. I never use it. Other people like me, we use it all the time. So it is not universally beloved, but for me, it works really well. You can also use your little office hole punch thing, so you don't need this big fancy thing. Dan got this for me for Christmas several years ago. I think when I first started junk journaling, but I had not yet started posting to YouTube regularly, so I'm using the slightly larger, and you can see my line is not perfectly straight, but I am fine with how it looks. There's 2 different size holes that you can get from this Big Bite. And I'm using the larger one. We have a different technique we're going to be using in a minute where I'll use the smaller size hole. But this one, I want it big enough that I can get my yarn in and out of very easily. There we go. So this is our, let me scoop this up here. That makes things fast and easy. So this is just going to be maybe a little tuck spot on the edge of a page. I think I'd like to use my red yarn here. I think I might use just red. I liked combining the red and the green here, but for this purpose, I think I might just use the red. I don't know why, that's just sort of how I'm feeling today. There we go. And I'm going to make my little pieces of yarn about 5 inches long. You don't want them too short because you want to be able to, you know, manipulate them and have enough ends that you can grab onto. So I'm just making them about 5 inches in length. I'm going to be trimming them down anyway. So, partial piece there. This is, as you can see, is a sort of a bulky yarn. Generally, the sport weight yarn, I think, works a little bit better. But since I'm not going to be combining this with any other yarn, I think I'm going to be okay with this one. Let me do a few more. I was not bothering to count. Tell me if you knit, if you tend to have yarn around. I did not grow up knitting. It wasn't anything my mom did, but my cousin taught me how to knit. And I've always been grateful to her for that. Okay, now all we're going to do is just to put fringe in these holes. And I'm just going to take each one. This is just like you put on the top of a tag. Fold each piece in half. And I'm going to go down from the top. Pull that loop through. And the yarn could be kind of persnickety because those plies are going to want to bunch up on top of each other. Pull that loop through. Make sure you have your, hold on to your 2 ends and tuck those 2 ends through that loop. And just pull it tight. They don't have to be even. You're going to be trimming them anyway. Let me do another 1 or 2, and then I'm going to show you a way that might, an alternate way to insert your fringe that might be a little bit faster for you. If your yarn is being stubborn, you might twist it a little bit just to get through that hole. Pull your loop up on the other side. I'm trying to get my chubby fingers out of the way here so maybe you can see a little bit better. and tuck those two ends through, just like that. Let me do one more. Maybe I'll bring you in a little bit closer. Extreme close up. This one's one of the longer ones. Again, fold it in half. Go in from the top. Pull that loop out, sticking up from the back side. And tuck your two ends in from the top. And then just tighten it like that. If it's easier for you to work with longer pieces and you have plenty of yarn, cut longer. Now, here's an alternative way to use it if you enjoy using a crochet hook and if you have a crochet hook. If you use the crochet hook method, you're going to come in from the back and pull your yarn through. So it's the same thing that you did before, because you've got this loop forming on the back. And then use your crochet hook to pull those ends through. I'm going to do a few more like that. This one, if you're inclined to cut your yarn a little bit longer, and you use this method, you may be glad for that. In from the back. And see, this is the same action as we used when we were just poking it in by hand. Pull that loop in from the back. And just pull those two ends together, kind of coax them through. Now, one thing you're going to want to be careful about, you can see that on the back here, we just have this this loop going up and the ends coming through. You see mostly that loop. On this side, you see this bar here. That's the top end of that loop that's visible from the front of your piece. I prefer to see that that little bar, that little horizontal piece of yarn there, because that to me looks like a purl stitch, and I think that looks great. If you prefer this, do it this way. But it's probably best, it's probably most pleasing, I guess, if you do it the same way all the way through. So let's just finish up here. And you'll get the idea. Let's see if I'm still, yes, I'll just leave it close up until we get to the application stage. But yeah, how old would I have been when my cousin taught me how to knit? I must have been, I was little, because I remember the house we lived in, and it was the one we lived in before I was in 3rd grade, so I would have been probably 9, earlier than that. I might have been 7 or 8. And again, my mom wasn't a knitter, but she supported my knitting endeavors. And I remember one year for my birthday, I got she gave me a Susan Bates knitting instructional book. It was like a kit. And I remember just being fascinated by the book, and it had, instructions of all of the stitches, which my cousin had already taught me, but it was kind of nice to have something to refer to and to have the patterns of things. What did I make? I made slippers, those garter stitch slippers that every kid knitter, I think in the 60s must have started with. And in the kit there was a ball of kind of white, bulky yarn, and boy, I haven't thought of this in years. And I think they were size 10 or 10.5 plastic needles. And they must have been a fairly brittle plastic, because fairly on after getting that Susan Bates kit in the 60s, this would have been the early 60s, I dropped a needle somewhere, and I chipped the point. It was still perfectly usable, but I felt bad that I had marred my new Susan Bates knitting needles, but they were still perfectly functional, so it wasn't anything that upset me for long. But the Susan Bates logo had sort of a, I'm going to bring out my yarn and cut a few more pieces here. The Susan Bates logo had sort of, it was like a signature, you know, that said Susan Bates. And I always felt like she had done it with her own handwriting, whoever the heck Susan Bates was. I'm going to have to look that up. Why I remember Susan Bates knitting needles, I don't know. But she was a young child's knitting friend, as was my cousin. And then I didn't knit for many, many years. I mean, like 50 years, probably. 45 years, anyway. I lived in Texas for a long time. And then when I moved to Western New York State, this was in 2000, early 2001, of course it was. And everybody was knitting. All these people in the cold weather of living in upstate New York, you know, all of a sudden there was knitters everywhere. And I thought, wow, I remember how to do that, I think. And Dan and I had moved there for my job. And I found myself with a lot of time on my hands before I really got involved in things. And I started knitting. By then, YouTube, no, we had no YouTube then, but I could buy a knitting book or two. And I got a book of knitting dishcloths. I made dishcloths out of cotton yarn. Oh, wow. It's so funny. I had not planned to be reminiscing about this today, but yet here I am. And so I made all of these dishcloths and these knitted dishcloths. You know, they were garters, but you know, there was different stitches and things you did. And it was a great way to reintroduce myself to the craft. I've since knit many things since then. Not really a sweater knitter. I'm much more of a quicker project, baby hat, baby sweater, you know, donate to the hospital sort of thing. Oh, good. This is going to come out exactly right. So I like the smaller projects. But initially, back in 2001, oh my goodness, the piles of cotton dishcloths I made, to the point I was mailing them to my sisters, I was mailing them to my friends, I was practically stopping people on the street saying, here, let me give you some dishcloths. I didn't exactly do that, but it was close to that point. And anyway, that's kind of how I got back into having yarn in my life. And to be honest, I think that cotton yarn makes better pot holders than it does dishcloths. I'm not truly a fan of the dishcloths, but they were fun to knit. Okay, I'm going to come back out now. And we're going to give it a haircut. I might as well just use my small scissors that are here. I'll make certain I've tightened these up, and you can tell since I went in the same direction, I've got that little purl stitch, that little bar at the top. And it's just like I'm cutting a little kid's bangs. This fringe is going to be, it's just going to be so touchable on the side of a page embellishment. If it was shorter, you know, on the top of a tag. And again, there is bulk, but if it's on the side of a page, like hanging over the edge like this, most of the bulk is going to be outside the enclosure of your signature. So what a cute little page edging this would be. And could be a little pocket. Should we glue it in place? Let's do that. We're here together. We're reminiscing. We're talking about Susan Bates. And crochet, I did somehow pick up learning to crochet along the way somewhere. It's great for Afghans. Great for donating things if you ever are of a mind to make a little small crocheted blanket. They're great for baby blankets, but they're also great to donate to senior citizens too. Folks in a retirement community, or maybe to donate to Meals on Wheels for people to take to some of their Meals on Wheels clients. Just a great gift for a senior citizen as they're sitting around staying cozy. Oh, this is going to be a cute pocket. So I'm going to, let's see. I think I don't really even need to put, well, yeah, I am going to need to put a little bead of glue there, because we're going to want to stop the action before it gets to that yarny part. There we go. There's a little pocket. I put something a little more decorative in there, maybe stencil over here to pretty up the page a little bit more, but you definitely get the idea. Isn't that cute? Let's look at one other thing that we can do with yarn, and that is not putting fringe on like this, but doing a blanket stitch. Here's a blanket stitch that I did wrong. Because the classic blanket stitch has this solid line on the edge of your piece and not in it. I kind of did this backwards. Is that buttonholes? I don't know. I'm going to show you the blanket stitch more properly done. Here's the blanket stitch. And we're going to do just a little demo of that. If I can find a piece of cardstock or something. Did I not prep very well for this? I think I need to look for a piece of book page. Or maybe I can use this. I think I need to go look for some kind of base to use for this blanket stitch. So I'll be right back. Okay, now let's come in with this blanket stitch, which is going to look something like this. I might have to adjust. There we go. Don't want you to miss any of the exciting action. Now I have punched holes just like I did with our little fringe weaving example. I punched holes a centimeter apart. They're a little bit off. I am not worried about that. But I used the smaller hole instead of the larger hole. So I've threaded a needle, a large eye needle, and I've cut yarn that is about 5 times plus a little more the length of the piece that I'm going to be stitching. So let's see if I do this right. I'm going to come in from the back, and on the back side, I'm going to want to secure it down. If this was fabric or felt, I would be tying a knot, but I do not want to have that in this. So I just put a little piece of tape down, and I can glue it later if I wish to, but for now that's going to hold this yarn end in place. Then I'm going to, this is for the first stitch only, I'm going to come in through that same hole, and I'm going to wind the yarn around my needle, and this is only on the first stitch, and that's going to create a little knot that's going to secure that first end of the blanket stitch. I'm just pulling that through. I'm using my fingers to kind of hold those little wrapped pieces in place. And you can see here, there's just, it's a very small, very, very flat sort of knot. Then because I'm going this way, it's different if you're going in different directions, but I tend to go from left to right. I'm gonna go down with my needle, And watch for when that loop appears, and I'm going to go down again into that loop. The yarn will get a little bit easier to work with as it gets shorter. I probably cut this one way too long, and you can see how the yarn has caught itself in that loop to create a little bit of yarn that's going across the edge of our paper. So we're just going to continue with that process. And these needles, if you don't have a needle like this, again, ask a knitting friend. They're going to have plenty, or somebody who crochets. They're going to have some of these big eye needles. I would not rush out to the store or to go online to purchase one. If you don't have one, you probably know somebody who does. There we go. This is not the brightest color, but I think it could look nice as a side pocket. I was going to demonstrate with this pink because I thought that pink was really pretty, and it's a much smaller yarn, but I was afraid it might be a little bit slippery. Every yarn is going to be different in consistency, in thickness, in how it behaves when you have it stitched into place. Some is going to be quite slippery, and maybe on that fringe it might want to unwind itself a little bit. This may not be exactly how you do it. I think there's lots of different ways to do a blanket stitch, and as I showed you, this is one that I somehow did backwards. So I don't dislike it, but I mostly do like this this version of the blanket stitch with that row of yarn that's lined up with the edge of our paper. I remember my mom showing me this stitch when I was really little and used to like to make doll clothes. And she just did it with regular embroidery floss. She was a prolific embroiderer, stitcher, sewer. Did not knit, but did a lot of sewing. Made all my clothes. Helped me make my doll clothes. I'm doing lots of reminiscing today, aren't I? I didn't expect this yarn to bring out the memories in me, but yet here we are. And you can see with each stitch that we add, it sort of tightens the stitch before. See this one, it's sort of going back, but when you tighten it, it kind of pulls everything into place. Don't want to tighten it too much, but you're probably not going to rip your paper. There we go, almost done with this. And then I am going to, before we leave, I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back to our fringe stitch and show you a little bit more about how I made that fluffy spine of that little notebook, because I felt like I didn't explain that very well the first time through. So I have a little prototype I can show you. There we go. But even, it's so chilly out today. It's late November as I film this in Portland, Oregon, and it's chilly outside. Our winters are blessedly temperate here, but for us it feels cold if it's in the high 30s. There we go. Yeah, so this I could use as a pocket. Oops, I didn't go down through my loop in time, did I? That's okay. Easy to get back in there. I love this. I don't know what the brand of this this needle is, but it has a little crook at the end of it, which is super useful. Yeah, I clearly made too much had a yarn that was a little bit too long here, but that's fine. Easier to cut off the extra. And in fact, if I had extra, I could make a little tassel or something. It'd be cute to put a little tassel. Now this blanket stitch, for people who are clever in crochet, they could use the loops that we now have along this edge, and they can crochet like a little bit of lace or something like that. here I am at the end, and I am just going to do one more loop underneath here, just to hopefully secure that in place. There we go. And I'm going to tape down my other end. There we go. So this could be a really nice pocket, and this is not nearly as bulky as the fringed, but it gives us that. I think I would probably decorate this a little bit more, but it gives us a nice, pretty textural sort of element along the edge of that paper. Let's go back to how we can create this a little more easily. I realized I hadn't explained this very well. What is at the basis of this little notebook is a little notebook like this. This is my piece of, oh, let me pull back out again. There we go. This is my piece of a file folder. I just used that factory fold and cut out a piece that was, you know, what is that about? Little more than 6 inches. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. And what is it about? Just a little over 5. And across, I put some music page on the inside, and then I just stitched a few little scraps of paper in there. This is just going to be a very simple little notebook. And I used, this is like looking at it in its underwear. It is not dressed yet on the outside. I took 2 pieces, pull out this ruler again just to double check. When folded, yeah, it's about 3 1/8 by 5 and almost 5 1/8. I didn't measure very closely. And I took pieces, a little piece of decorative paper, the same size as the front and the same size as the back. And the one that's going to be on the front, I punched my holes in and wove my fringe in just like we did earlier. And then I'm just going to glue that here so that the fringe part sticks out over the spine. So let's pull out, I'm going to do the Fabri-Tac, the beacon glue, because I want to make certain that I get this fibrous part glued into place. There we go. We've been having some good glue discussions in the comments section of late. I've enjoyed those. Somebody suggested I get a tacky glue, a clear tacky glue. I think it's Aileen's. And I did get some. I haven't tried it yet, but many thanks to whoever suggested that. All right, now this is going to seem like it's, because of the thickness of this yarn here, it's going to seem like it's sticking up. It might be seeping out a little bit, so you might want to put it underneath something, something heavy. And that glue was a little bit forgiving in letting me slide it around. And then I can just use my art glitter glue for the back because that doesn't have the fringe on it. And this little one that I did last night, I just put it underneath a heavy book. It still is popping up a little bit, so I might want to put a little closure or a bit of a paper clip or something on there, but I think this is generally a very nice little notebook. I'll put some kind of focal point there, maybe a bird or some sort of, a wintry tree or something like that. I don't know what's going to go on the cover yet, but that's the front. I just put my decorated piece just flush with that manila folder cover. And we have a nice little notebook. So there you go. Get out your yarn and see what kind of fun things you can come up with. And I bet you're really going to enjoy it. And again, find your friends that have this stuff. They're going, I guarantee you they're going to be very, very happy to give you some of their scraps and probably loan you some of their needles too. We'll see you soon, guys. Thanks so much.